news comes first. This is ABC-7 Extra.
Welcome to ABC-7 Extra. Good evening, I'm Stephanie Valle. For the next half hour, we're going to talk about a recent massive shakeup to the future housing market, and it could lead to a lower cost of both buying and selling a home here in El Paso. We'll get extra perspective from real estate experts tonight. The National Association of Realtors, which represents more than 1 million realtors in the U.S., recently agreed to settle antitrust lawsuits with groups of home sellers. The NAR has agreed to pay $418 million in damages and eliminate rules on realtor commissions. Here's a look at what this could mean for the housing market.
Some big changes are likely coming to the housing market. Typically, home sellers pay a standard 6% commission to their listing agent and their buyer's realtor, but it appears that's changing.
People are going to scrutinize, as they always do, a little more carefully all of the expenses involved.
On March 15th, the National Association of Realtors agreed to settle a lawsuit over inflated realtor commissions and lack of transparency. The 6% commission at the heart of the controversy was never a set rule, more of an industry standard. And some realtors say that money doesn't just go into their pockets.
These properties have to be marketed. Digital ads have to be run, target marketing, photographs, all these aerial and drone videos. Who pays for that? The agent is paying for that.
A judge still has to approve the settlement, but TD Cowen Insights estimates the changes will cause real estate commissions to drop by 25 to 50%. It could also shift a chunk of that cost from sellers to buyers. So let's crunch the numbers. According to recent data from the NAR, the median single-family home sales price in January was $383,500. The seller of that typical house would pay more than $23,000 in realtor commissions as it stands.
It's very much a deterrence for people wishing to buy.
The seller of that typical house would pay more than $23,000 in realtor commissions as it stands now. Right now, home sellers incorporate those commissions into their sticker price. But some real estate experts say this settlement opens the door to much lower competitive commissions, perhaps even more flat rate fees, and that could mean a drop in average home sale prices.
Joining me now is Lynn Restbrook, a realtor here in El Paso. Thank you for being here today. And first off, I'd like to talk about your background working in real estate. You've been an agent for almost 20 years, is that right?
Correct.
So what was your gut response when you heard about this settlement, and how will you be professionally and personally affected?
So, I think for me personally, and most agents that I know, commissions have always been negotiable. So I think there's a little bit of surprise element to it, where we really try to work with buyers it's with sellers, because that's when how you're negotiating your commissions, and the sellers typically pay the buyer's fee because a seller is who has equity. A buyer has fees with loans and things like that, and so with these proposed changes, it might shift costs to them that's going to already, with the interest rates and things like that, that's going to increase the burden, and it's going to be pretty detrimental to a buyer. So personally, it won't affect me and a lot of agents very much in terms of the way that we will, or the amount of money that we'll make on a sale, because again, they've always been negotiable. We have to remember that the 6%, which has been a typical thing for decades, is split between a buyer's and a seller's agent, and then that is split between a broker and then your taxes, and plus we're independent contractors, and so we're also paying marketing and things like that. So really that amount is, although I do realize that it does look large, and I totally understand that, what we actually take home in our pocket is probably less than 50% of that. So I think the biggest thing professionally and personally is that I feel like it just kind of sullies our name in a profession that really isn't well respected to begin with. And that people will only read the headlines and not read, kind of what the entire settlement is about.
So there does seem to be a mixed reaction to how this will affect those who are trying to buy or sell a home. So what do you anticipate happening, especially here in El Paso?
So El Paso is a very unique market, as in that we're very stable, and we have been historically. I work in multiple other states, and some are higher dollar, and so there for years we've been negotiating, more dramatically on the commission prices. It's a little bit harder here. You know, if you're representing someone, we still have homes. I love working in, you know, the $150,000 to $250,000 price range, because those buyers need great representation. They need our best efforts, but you know, the payday is not as great, but you know, there's other things that make it special. And so sometimes I worry about those buyers if you don't have enough agents who are willing to kind of put in the time with them without knowing what they're going to be paid, because that's the crux of the whole settlement. Is it's not that buyers agents will no longer be paid, it's that we can no longer advertise a certain amount on the MLS to buyers agents, and so you're going to have to kind of come in and request an amount.
I see. So there were some national reports that referred to the National Association of Realtors as a cartel that controlled the housing market. So you mentioned that this settlement seems to have sullied that name, and if people are reading this being described as a cartel, I would imagine that also doesn't help. So what do you have to say about that description, and how can this settlement ultimately affect the perception of and trust in real estate agents?
Sure. The original lawsuit did mention that started this. I think it was in Missouri or Kansas, and it was a class action lawsuit. And I read that when it first came out months ago, and I thought, wow, this attorney is really great at, you know, vilifying agents. And I understand if there would be some price fixing, but there's really no evidence of that. And the fact that companies have settled and that National Association of Realtors have settled, it actually doesn't really prove any guilt. They were just worried about the numbers blowing up so much, you know, that they said, okay, we'll settle for this price, even though it's a huge sticker price. We'd rather settle for this. And also what happens is that that indemnifies all of the agents personally, if you're a member of the National Association of Realtors, from being sued directly. And so there has been a lot of copycat lawsuits from the one that mentioned that we were a cartel. And he was just a great attorney there.
So I guess I'm going back to the commission, which was the crux of this whole lawsuit. What do you anticipate? I guess if you're saying that it was always negotiable, does that mean that there were some bad actors who gave the perception that it wasn't negotiable? And I did hear stories in which they did negotiate it, but ultimately in the signed deal, it was set at 6%, even though the seller said, I negotiated it down, but it was still written in 6%. What do you have to say to those instances? Do you think there were just bad actors?
Sure. I mean, I assume that that's where the original lawsuit started with it had to have some kind of valid claim on it. I'll tell you that in the advent of e-signing and things like that, people don't read contracts. So probably if you're visiting with a seller and you're negotiating, it probably could be very easy to slip something like that in there. Again, that's not something I've heard of or experienced. I think we all are trying to get paid for what we add value for, but not more than that. I mean, even if I have a buyer and a seller and they're trying to buy one house, I try to put myself in their shoes and make sure that I'm only getting paid for the value that I'm adding for that situation. But of course, in any industry, you're going to have bad actors, so.
Okay. Well, Lynn Westbrook, thank you for your insight today. I appreciate that, and thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
And you're watching ABC-7 Extra. Still ahead, we are getting perspective on the settlement from a local expert in real estate and finance, plus the latest trend in home buying and selling.
This is your invitation to experience a feeling only found in a Lexus electrified vehicle. Experience the elevation of electrification and some of the best offers of the year on select models at the Invitation to Lexus sales event.
Get special offers on select Lexus RZ models.
Watch Smart Money Thursday on ABC-7 at 4 with Myro Capital Management. You'll learn how to save money the right way and make better decisions to set you and your family up for financial success. Smart Money Thursday on ABC-7 at 4, sponsored by Myro Capital Management.
¿Qué color? Perfecto, mijo. Gracias. Thank you. What's wrong, mijo?
Donating to a pet's medical care is one of the many ways you can help families in your community. Pets and people belong together. Learn more at petsandpeopletogether.org.
It's tough being a teenager. The pressures to fit in while discovering who you are is so huge. I remember I felt alone and didn't quite know how to express myself in a positive way. Understanding that pain was the most important part of my healing journey. But this is robbing you of your identity and distracting your mind from what it really needs, to be present in the moment. Discover yourself in a mirror, not in a camera, because you are your best hope.
Can't get to a TV? Stay up to date and watch every ABC-7 newscast wherever you are. Complete coverage of breaking news and accurate, reliable storm track weather streaming live on KVIA.com and the free KVIA News app.
Paso school today. Welcome back to ABC-7 Extra. Good evening, I'm Stephanie Valle. Tonight we are talking about the effects of a massive class action lawsuit settlement against the National Association of Realtors and its effect on the housing market. Now I'm joined by Dr. Jizing Feng, an assistant professor of finance at UTEP in the Department of Economics and Finance. Now, Dr. Feng's research delves deeply into finance, specifically emphasizing real estate and corporate finance, and he also contributes as a managing editor for the Journal of Real Estate Portfolio Management. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
What was your gut reaction when you heard about this settlement? Did it, or the outcome of the class action lawsuit, come as a surprise to you?
It's not a surprise to me because in this world, if you look around globally, there's a lot of different models. If you look at in the media brokers industry, there's a lot of change in the past years. It is a surprise to me that the realtors model lasts for such a long time.
Okay, so in your research, how much of these closing costs incurred by El Paso home sales on average went to the commission?
Roughly on average 5 to 6% in El Paso. So that's normally speak to listing agent and the buyer's agent.
So do you know what the average home sale price is in El Paso? So what are we talking about in terms of actual dollars and cents?
So the average price in El Paso, I think it's about 210, 220,000 something. So when we talk about 6%, that's roughly $10,000.
Okay, so from my understanding of this, this is a commission that is, it is 6%, 5 to 6%, but that is split between the agents for the buyer and the seller, that's right?
Yes, that's correct.
So there's a lot of back and forth about what this could mean for the price of homes. So what do you project short term and long term?
In the short term, I will see business as usual, not much change. In the long run, it maybe have a slightly impact on the home price because the sellers get more money and the buyers may get some benefit from it.
Does this mean that the buyers, home buyers, are going to end up having to pay more costs, or does it mean that sellers are going to have to pay more out of pocket?
Home buyers always paying for it. Even nominally, as what it is now, the sellers pay for it. That price are built into the buyer and seller.
So does this, there's some speculation, if you will, that home buyers will have to bear more of the costs, or selling agents won't be as effective at marketing homes because they would invest up front in order to get attention for their listings. What do you have to say about that speculation?
Now, firstly, that's back to the previous questions. When the cost is paying for from the seller, the home buyer also suffer because this is a cost, the cost associated with buyer and seller. So In a new model, we don't know what is going on for the home buyer side. Buyer may need to pay a commission and seller may pay less, and there may be more negotiation process on this one. We are not sure what will be the new model yet. So far, we don't have any clue what will be going to be.
Okay, so I guess it's more of a wait and see, if you will.
Yes, yes. At least wait for a couple months.
Okay, all right. Well, you're watching ABC-7 Extra, and still ahead, what the president wants to do to bring down home prices. Plus, we examine what's next for the housing market in El Paso overall.
My sinuses were clogged, my head was throbbing, and my muscles ached. I really didn't have the energy to drive to see a physician. With University Medical Center of El Paso's telehealth services, I stayed in the comfort of my home and consulted virtually with my UMC provider. No traffic, parking, or crowded doctor's offices. Better health is a phone call away. I'm happy I called UMC.
Call us today for an appointment at 915-790-5700. At UMC, we care for El Paso.
My dad should have been here today, but he was struck and killed while riding his bike.
If you're on your bike, follow all traffic laws, use hand signals before you turn, and ride in bike lanes when possible. Because what happens in an instant can affect your loved ones for life.
I miss him every day.
Preparing for a road trip takes a lot of planning to make sure you reach your destination. Dodds Wealth Management Group is your local financial planning firm. We are fiduciaries and obligated to act in our clients' best interest. No one knows what life changes will come, so let us help you be ready when they do. Dodds Wealth Management Group, creating, building, and preserving wealth.
Swipe right on savings this month at Oscar Leaser's Hyundai of El Paso. Maybe your match is $4,000 off MSRP on new Santa Fe. Not 2, not 3, but $4,000 off MSRP. Swipe right on those savings, and you'll like no interest on Santa Fe and Tucson. Or maybe it's time for you to swipe right on electric, Kona EV, Ioniq 5, and Ioniq 6, all with $7,500 in retail bonus cash. Over $7,000 in savings on electric vehicles, and you won't have to stop for gas anymore. Swipe right on savings at Oscar Leaser's Hyundai of El Paso.
Welcome back to ABC-7 Extra. I'm Stephanie Valle. We discussed how the massive settlement between home sellers and the National Association of Realtors could affect our housing market. And now to other factors hoping to influence housing costs. President Joe Biden released a plan to increase the supply of affordable housing, but his plan comes at a time when housing prices are high and continue to rise. Here's a look at the president's proposal and whether it will help in this current housing market.
Housing prices continue to rise. The National Association of Realtors released its February numbers last week, which showed median home sale prices are at $384,500. That's 5.7% higher than this time last year, and it's the 8th month in a row prices have gone up, and the price hikes are in all 4 regions of the U.S. It's something President Joe Biden wants to change.
Too many people, the dream of having a good home, it still feels out of reach. I get it.
Experts say prices will likely remain high this spring for now.
I don't think there will be any meaningful decline in home prices in many parts of the country.
It's not just high sticker prices making homes expensive. A 30-year fixed mortgage rate as of last Thursday was about 6.87%, according to Freddie Mac. There's also a high demand right now and low inventory, which drives up prices further. To help with those costs, Biden wants to give Americans an annual tax credit of $400 a month for the next 2 years to go toward their mortgage. He also wants to encourage more building so buyers and renters have more options. But some experts say the cost of land to build is still high.
It's not that the house is not affordable, it's that the land has very volatile economic cycle.
And I'm rejoined now by Dr. Zifeng Feng, an assistant professor of finance at UTEP in the Department of Economics and Finance. So Dr. Feng, do you think the president's plan of giving Americans an annual tax credit of $400 a month for the next 2 years to go towards their mortgage would actually help make home ownership more affordable?
Is so far just a proposal yet. We don't know when it's coming out, and we don't know why it actually went through. So it will have some help if it does come out.
What do you say about the speculation about the high cost of land, and what goes into estimating those costs?
I think the biggest issue is that it's not just high cost of land, it's the inventory, and then a lot of zoning requirement, a lot of regulations make us to develop land into residential homes difficult.
Now, what is, talking in terms of El Paso, where there is so much building in northwest and northeast as well as far east El Paso because of the abundance, seemingly abundance of land, do you say that the cost of developing the land in El Paso is just as high as it is on the national average, or is it lower?
That's difficult to say. Firstly, El Paso do not have abundance of land. So we are next to Mexico, so the other side of the city is gone. We are close to Fort Bridge, and then the other side of those cities are gone, and then we have a mountain in between. So the developable land is not that high. When we talk about the developable land, means that the land has to have access to utilities, has to be close to work, has a reasonable distance that you can go to work. And that type of land actually is not that much.
Okay, so interest rates, though, remain hovering near 6.9%. Can you talk about why the Fed has kept the rate at that level?
Fed is now at a difficult situation. We have an unemployment rate as less than 4%, and then we have economic growth, GDP growth as high as 3% and above. So at that situation, there's no pressures, almost little reasons for the Fed to act now to decrease the interest rate, because housing market is just one of the factors in the economics. The Fed look at more than just the housing market.
And home prices went up 6% from January of 2023 to 2024, and officials say that is the biggest yearly hike since the end of 2022. So how is that affecting the search for homes here in El Paso?
The home inventory is still low in El Paso, so we have very few newly built homes, and those homes that are owned by other owners. If they want to sell their home, they need to look for another home that is back to the selling a home with low interest rate and buy a home with high interest rate. So they have low incentive or little incentive to do so. The inventory is still low, so we see the housing price should not have a big jump or decrease in the coming maybe weeks or months.
And monthly rents are lower in the nation's largest cities. Do you think that's a more viable option to rent, even for those who really want to own their own home?
If you don't have any urgency or family issues to buy a home, it's a good strategy to wait at this moment.
So for those who are gearing up to search for a new place to live, especially as we inch closer to the summer, what do you think they can expect?
They expect the home price may be stable or slightly higher.
Okay, so still seeing those prices not really fluctuate in a way that's beneficial to home buyers.
Not in the near future.
So what would you say to someone who comes to you worried that they may not be able to buy a home? What would you say, whether it be to ease their concerns or to put things into perspective?
In the longer run, it's profitable to build homes, and then the home price may be slightly lower. We don't know yet, but it is now. We do not expect that the home price is going to have a huge increase like what we see in the COVID period. So there's the upside potential is limited for the home price.
Okay. All right, Dr. Fang, a finance professor at UTEP, thank you for lending your expertise tonight.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Stephanie Valle, and this has been ABC 7 Extra.